I'm Joseph Vaughn Perling. I'm the Managing Director of the New Liberty Dollar. The New Liberty Dollar sponsors for Bitcoin the Bitcoin Specie Project. The Bitcoin Specie Project is essentially the pocket change of Bitcoin. Pocket change like you would have in your pocket. So coins that you could carry around and use to buy things. Simple transactions, small quantity in point of sale.
Okay, and then you can put it down?
Let me give you the other side.
This is very nice.
Okay, this is an example of a Bitcoin specie. Now, specie is a word that you may not have heard, or at least not in this context. What it means is it's precious metal money, money made out of something of value, gold, silver, things that have a value in the world. And what you have is a 1 ounce, 1 troy ounce Bitcoin specie. On the front, you'll see the classic B of Bitcoin, the logo, and on the back, you'll see on the reverse, you'll see a QR code, which is a code that's readable by a phone or a computer or a camera that will tell you some information. And what this QR code tells you is it takes you to a web page that shows you the current spot market value of that piece in Bitcoin and in all the other currencies. It's not a private key. There's no private key. There's no Bitcoin stored in this, just in the same way that a silver dollar doesn't store any dollars. The silver dollar, back when there were silver dollars, was itself valuable, and the paper dollar was meant to be able to be exchanged for a silver dollar, which was valuable, and the paper was essentially a promise, a promissory note. And if you look at the U.S. currency of today, you'll see Federal Reserve note on the top of it. And note is a promise. It's a promissory note. So essentially what we're doing now in exchanging dollars back and forth is exchanging promises. And the promise is a promise of what? Well, it's a promise to pay you dollars. So it's kind of a circular argument. The promise is only to give you more promises. There's no end to that, right? Once upon a time, the promise was a promise of gold or silver. But slowly over time, over the last 100 years, since the Federal Reserve was established, that promise was diluted as the silver certificates came out of circulation and were replaced by the Federal Reserve notes. So Bitcoin is a global currency. And as a global currency, in order to elevate Bitcoin and to make it even more worthy, we're backing it with gold and silver and specie pieces. It's not always a bad idea, but it's most often a bad idea. And here's why. When you have a free market economy, an economy that's balanced by itself, you have every individual brain as a decision maker in that economic situation. When you have a central banker who is controlling the amount of money, you have a very small number of brains. It destroys the beauty of the democracy, of the democratic output of letting every brain matter, and makes just a few matter. It's the same problem you had with the fall of communism. You have too few decision makers trying to make decisions for a very large number of people. It doesn't work in the real world. It also is, there's lots of conspiracy theories. Many of them may be true. I couldn't tell you. I'm not a conspiracy buff. But what they tell us is that the control of this monetary instrument that we use most commonly and most every country has is established in order to siphon money away from people by diluting its value and to bring that value to the banks and essentially to then control the society through its banks. Central banking, through the process of monetary inflation, steals money from everyone who holds it. When a currency is inflated, it loses its value. Every fiat currency is essentially an inflationary currency. It's based on the Keynesian model of creating more money in order to stimulate demand. And whenever a government gets in trouble, this is what they do. And the effect of that is to take money away from the lowest among us, because the money is first created in the government and then given to the banks or the government contractors, so they get money before it's been inflated. After they spend it, it's the first time it's been spent. And that inflation then ripples out and has greater and greater effect the more times it's spent. So by the time the common person receives it, they've already received the inflated dollars. In the last 100 years, the US dollar has lost almost all of its value, 98%, 97%, depending on how you look at it and how you measure that value. The measurement of the value itself is something that has come under a lot of scrutiny. We've had the index of inflation has been adjusted many different ways in order to hide the amount of inflation that's been going on. Even Clinton did it with the quality metric, right? So now the amount of inflation is decreased by the amount that the quality is improved, supposedly. So maybe instead of buying steak, you buy hamburger, right? And so the dollars are equated to a different amount of stuff or a different kind of thing. So that even the inflation metric itself has been gained to try to hide it. Right. Gold and silver and precious metals, they are what they are. They're defined by their physical properties, by physics. They're an essential element. They can't lose value. They are what they are. If you measure the dollar's value in gold, you can see that the gold's price has gone up and up and up and up over time. There were many years where it was fairly stable when we were essentially on a gold standard, and some of the most productive years of the U.S. economy were during those periods of time. Very recently, we've had a drastic decrease in the price of gold, and many researchers have suggested that this is specifically because the price has been meant to go down subsequent to the requests for repatriation of gold held in the United States back into the native countries. People don't know this, but the United States has been holding the gold for many countries. Those countries want that gold back, and they asked the government of the United States to give it back, and the government said, no, you're going to have to wait. Well, wait for what? The gold would fit on a couple of airplanes. They could arrange for the security, and they could send it if they had it. Perhaps they don't have it. Or perhaps they don't want to send it when the price is valuable, so perhaps, one might conjecture, that they wanted the price to go down. Well, as it happens, there were some very large transactions which spooked the market to the tune of some $30 billion. It's money that no individual investor could afford to spend on selling gold short without having the gold. That's a very risky transaction. But if you're the one printing the money, you don't really have the risk. You can just print some more if you need to. So perhaps this was done to decrease the price of gold in order to be able to purchase enough gold to send back to the native countries.
Okay, now let's compare gold to Bitcoin. So what can Bitcoin maybe do even better than gold?
Right. Bitcoin and gold, and I've written some articles about this, Bitcoin and gold have almost opposite properties. Bitcoin is the perfect currency for the world for online transactions. It's not quite as good for point of sale. Now, gold and silver are horrible for online transactions. You'd have to ship them, you'd have to insure them, it would take time to send. Bitcoin has none of those problems. Bitcoin is sent immediately. It costs nothing to secure. The security is done by the process of the mining. So the blockchain is already secure. It's immediately sent over the internet. Almost no time. So they have almost opposite properties. Now, if Bitcoin were used in point of sale, like say a coin might be, then each of those transactions, every coffee you buy, every sandwich you buy, is going to create another transaction for the blockchain, and that's more work for the Bitcoin network. So one of the things with the Bitcoin Specie project is that we reduce the burden of managing the Bitcoin network by taking some transactions off of the network and doing them off-network with things that are worth something in Bitcoin. Well, we are physical things. We are physical beings. And everyone who has a body experiences the physical world. I mean, there are many ephemeral things, and some of the greatest things of value are these ephemeral things. You have love, you have the notions of peace, you have poetry, you have beauty. All of these are ephemeral. All of these are things that we can think about and things that we can value. But each of those have physical components too, right? For love, you have physical sex, you have bodies, you have beauty that you can appreciate with your eyes and touch with your hands. Each of these has to have some physical component. So in the same way that this digital money exists, it also must have some physical way to transact it. Gold and silver, it is what it is. They're physical metals. They're defined by their physical properties. It's a matter of physics. They have a certain number of electrons, certain number of protons, certain number of neutrons. They are what they are. A central bank is beholden to a secret group meeting in secret and making decisions, which they have to be secret, because if they expose them, then have to be these closed, secretive groups making decisions in private about how the whole world is going to have to react. How can you trust this? You can't. You can't know it. You can't see it. There's no way to validate it. There's no transparency. They could decide anything. If, I'm going to imagine that they have our best interests at heart and that they're doing the best they can in order to manage the currency flow. Even if you trust them completely, you still have to expect them to do the right thing, and they're humans. They don't know what the right thing is. They can only guess. And their history has shown that they haven't done the right thing. In fact, they've done exactly the wrong thing almost every time they've had a major decision to make. When they have fiscal problems, they don't solve them with fiscal solutions. If you have, if you're going to create more money in order to solve a fiscal problem, you've done exactly the opposite. You've essentially made the problem bigger. Instead, what they should have done is done nothing and let us feel the pain so that we make the decisions in order to decide what things we need to cut or what more taxes to pay in order to resolve these problems. Central banks are essentially made by a group of many of the largest banks. They get together and they create the central banks. The banks themselves, each of them, they're beholden to their shareholders. They have to make certain profit. They have to make difficult decisions. They often do things that they feel they need to in the best interests of their shareholders, but it appears very greedy. And greed, it's been said, the love of money is the root of all evil. Well, who loves money more than a banker? So perhaps there are some bankers who are evil, and perhaps they get carried away, perhaps they think they're doing the right thing, or perhaps they're doing it to try to enhance their shareholders' equity. Whatever the reason, they're very, very greedy, and they try to get as much money as they can. And one of the things when you have so much power and so much money is that you're able to influence the political decisions that are being made. Now, when you have the power of law, you have the jails, the judges, the law enforcement, and you also are able to print the money, you can afford to buy any of this to your heart's content. Where's the constraint? Where's the checks and balances? There's nothing.